Welcome to our channel. Today, we have a story that will leave you speechless, showcasing bravery, discipline, and unexpected twists. But before we dive into it, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop a comment below and share your location with us. And if you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We've got more incredible tales lined up for you, with a brand new video coming tomorrow at the same time. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss out on the next one. Now let's get started with today's adventure. Watch what happens when a gang tries to ambush a royal guard. It's insane. The last rays of sunlight cast long shadows across the grounds of the White House, turning the old stones golden as the evening began to settle in. The usual crowd of tourists had thinned out, their excited chatter slowly fading into a quiet calm, replaced by the soft whispers of the evening. Standing perfectly still at his post was Jake Harrison, a 28-year-old U.S. Army guard. His scarlet uniform, a bold contrast against the fading light, symbolized the discipline and honor of his role. But Jake was not just another ceremonial guard. Beneath his uniform lay a wealth of experience. 2 tours in Afghanistan and specialized combat training had turned him into something far more lethal than tourists realized. Behind the ceremonial rifle and bearskin cap was a trained warrior, one whose instincts and abilities had been honed in the heat of battle. As he stood tall and unyielding at his post, something in the air caught his attention, a subtle shift that his battlefield-trained senses immediately picked up. His eyes remained fixed forward, as protocol demanded, but his mind shifted into combat mode. In his peripheral vision, Jake noticed 5 men lingering near the gates, their body language sending off warning signals. These weren't ordinary tourists. No, these men moved with the predatory grace of seasoned street fighters. Each of them wore identical black hoodies, their appearance out of place for the mild weather. The leader of the group stood in front, a heavily muscled man with a jagged scar running down his left cheek. His cold gaze frequently flickered over to Harrison's post, a calculated interest in his eyes. It wasn't long before Jake recognized the leader's movements, a subtle gesture, the hand tracing something hidden in his pocket. A threat. Jake's combat experience kicked in immediately. His eyes scanned the surroundings, noting the positioning of the gang members. 2 men were near a stone pillar to his left. Another 2 leaned casually against the fence to his right. Despite their apparent nonchalance, Jake could sense the tension in the air. The tourists, mostly elderly couples and a few families, could feel it too. One by one, they started to back away, instinctively aware that something was off. A mother quickly hurried her children towards the gates, casting anxious glances over her shoulder as she left. The usual bustle of the palace grounds had gone silent. The tension was palpable, but Jake remained unmoved. His training had taught him to stay calm in the face of danger. As the gang continued to move, Jake's thoughts became a blur of calculations. Every step, every shift in their positions was being catalogued. He knew they were preparing for something. The leader, the man with the scar, was a seasoned veteran of the streets, a man who had earned his place through violence. Jake could see the glint of his intent in the leader's eyes. He was going to make his move, but Jake was ready. His mind raced through the possibilities. If they attacked, which direction would they come from? How far would they push? Jake had seen enough to know that when people like this chose a target, it was never a mistake. And they had chosen him. The air grew heavier as the gang members spread out, closing in on him. But Jake wasn't just standing there like a statue. His mind was working. His body remained still, but his senses were alive, every muscle prepared. The gang didn't realize it yet, but they were the ones walking into a trap. He had been in enough combat zones to know when to act and when to let his opponents make the first move. He could already tell from their positions that this wasn't just an impulsive confrontation, it was planned. They were attempting to corner him, but Jake was prepared. He had already mapped out every angle, every possible move, and the moment they struck, they'd be met with far more than they bargained for. As the minutes passed, the tension in the air grew thicker. The gang, positioning themselves carefully around Jake Harrison, had already begun to make their move. But Harrison remained unmoved, still standing at his post with unwavering discipline. His eyes stayed forward, just as protocol demanded, but his mind was racing. Every movement of the gang members was being catalogued, every shift in position accounted for. Years of combat experience had given him a sixth sense, a radar for danger that could cut through the atmosphere like a knife. He could feel their eyes on him, the leader's piercing stare cutting through the evening air. The gang moved in closer, slowly and deliberately, almost as if they were closing in on a wounded animal. Their calculated steps were anything but casual. The leader, the man with the jagged scar running down his cheek, was now standing directly in front of Harrison, staring him down. His cold eyes glinted with malicious intent, and his body language screamed of a predator ready to strike. The rest of the gang flanked Harrison, two positioned near a stone pillar, two more by the fence, all with their eyes trained on the guard. It was clear they had done this before. This wasn't just a random encounter. This was a planned ambush. Harrison's instincts were on high alert. Despite the calm exterior he presented, inside, every fiber of his being was prepared for the confrontation. His body remained perfectly still, but his mind was calculating every angle, every potential weapon that could be used against him. The leader's movements, his hand nervously tracing something hidden in his pocket, didn't go unnoticed by Harrison. It was a clear threat. He knew what that meant. The man was either armed or about to pull something. Harrison's mind quickly processed the situation. They were going to make a move, and when they did, Harrison would be ready. Jake's thoughts raced, analyzing the situation even as his body remained perfectly still. The leader, with his scarred face twisted into a sneer, continued to taunt him, calling out in a voice laced with contempt. "You think you're special standing there in that fancy uniform?" His words carried across the courtyard, meant to provoke. "You think that rifle makes you untouchable?" The leader's voice dripped with disdain, and Harrison knew that this wasn't just a threat. It was personal. These men weren't here for money or territory. This was about revenge, something far more dangerous. The gang leader continued, his words sharp and filled with venom. "I see everything that's wrong with this city," he sneered. "All dressed up, playing soldier, while real men fight in the streets." His gang gathered around him nodded in agreement, their street-hardened faces twisted with disdain for what they perceived as Harrison's arrogance. To them, the uniform was a symbol of everything they hated, a reminder of a system that had rejected them, that had shut them out. Harrison remained calm. His posture, perfect as always, gave no hint of the storm brewing inside. He was a man who had been trained to handle exactly this kind of situation. Every detail, every gesture had already been analyzed. He had seen it all before in combat. Zones. The gang wasn't as dangerous as they thought they were. Their overconfidence would be their downfall. The leader's voice dropped lower. His words now meant only for Harrison's ears. "My brother would have given anything to wear that uniform," he muttered, his tone bitter. "But they rejected him. Said he wasn't good enough. Now he's dead in an alley. And where were your precious standards then?" His words hit Harrison like a punch to the gut, not because he felt sympathy, but because he understood the depth of the gang leader's anger. It wasn't just about violence. It was about feeling invisible, feeling worthless, and trying to take it out on those who represented the system that had cast them aside. Jake didn't flinch. His breathing remained steady, his eyes never wavering. He was no stranger to this kind of aggression. He'd faced it before, but this time, it was different. He wasn't just defending himself. He was defending everything the uniform represented: honor, discipline, and the idea that there was something greater than the chaos these men represented. And then, without warning, the first shove came. Dev, the gang leader, stepped closer, his hands striking Harrison's chest with calculated force. Harrison barely moved, the push nothing more than a ripple against his solid stance. The gang was testing him, trying to provoke a reaction. But Harrison stood there, unshaken, unmoved. He was more than just a guard. He was a warrior. Trained for this. He wasn't about to let anyone, especially not a gang of street thugs, make him lose his composure. But Dev wasn't backing down. He shoved harder this time, aiming for Harrison's shoulder. Still standing tall, huh? Still think that fancy uniform means something? The taunts continued, each one designed to break Harrison's discipline, to make him crack under the pressure. But Harrison remained stone-faced, unyielding. He knew better than anyone. This wasn't just a battle of strength. It was a battle of wills. The standoff had reached a boiling point. Jake Harrison remained perfectly still, but inside, his mind was on high alert. The gang, led by Dev, had drawn closer, their every movement calculated, their intentions clear. Dev, the scarred leader, stood just inches away now, his taunts growing more personal with each word. His voice dripped with venom as he circled Harrison, still trying to provoke a response. The tension in the air was almost unbearable, but Jake stood firm, a statue of discipline. He wasn't just a ceremonial guard, he was a trained soldier. And these street thugs were about to learn the difference. You think that uniform makes you better than us? Dev sneered, his voice sharp as he moved in closer, closing the gap between them. His eyes bore into Harrison's, trying to break through his unyielding composure. But Harrison didn't flinch. His posture remained perfect, every muscle in his body honed from years of combat training. Harrison's eyes scanned the surroundings, calculating the position of each gang member. 2 of them flanked his left, 2 more by the right, closing in from every angle. The last man, Marcus, stood, ready to make a move from behind. The gang was trying to trap him, but Harrison was no amateur. He had seen this before. Pretty uniform, isn't it? Dev continued, his voice laced with contempt. Too bad it doesn't stop you from bleeding. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the outline of something in his pocket. Likely a weapon, a knife, or a gun, Harrison guessed. The subtle gesture was a clear threat, one that didn't escape Jake's trained peripheral vision. He recognized it from his time on the battlefield, an intimidation tactic, a prelude to violence. But Jake wasn't intimidated. He was already several steps ahead. Harrison knew that the gang wasn't just here for a fight. They were here for something more. This wasn't a random attack. This was personal. It was about power, control, and Dev's deep-seated resentment. Dev had made that clear when he spoke of his brother, how his brother had tried to join the military only to be rejected. That bitterness was fueling everything. Harrison could see it in the way Dev moved, the way his eyes flashed with rage. The gang wasn't just targeting him as a guard. They were targeting everything he represented. Discipline, honor, and a world of rules they didn't understand. Dev's voice dropped lower, more dangerous. My brother would have given anything to wear that uniform. He growled, his hands clenching into fists. But they didn't think he was good enough. Now he's dead. And here you are, playing soldier while men like my brother rot in the streets. His words were biting, aimed directly at Harrison's core. Harrison had heard it all before. People trying to tear down what they didn't understand. But this wasn't the time to engage in a battle of words. Jake knew that now was the moment. The moment when the confrontation would erupt into violence. The gang had set the stage. They had surrounded him, made their threats clear, and now they were waiting for him to make a mistake. But Jake Harrison wasn't going to make a mistake. He knew exactly what he was dealing with. He had trained for this. Every push, every shove, every taunt from Dev was just another signal for Jake to stay calm, stay focused, and wait for the perfect moment. Then, without warning, the first blow came. Dev's fist slammed into Harrison's chest, hard enough to push him back slightly. The impact was forceful, but Harrison didn't move. He didn't flinch. He barely even reacted. His body was a solid wall of military precision. Harrison took the blow, feeling the sting in his ribs. But he knew this was only the beginning. As Dev pulled back, sneering, Harrison's senses were on high alert. His eyes remained locked on Dev, his gaze unwavering. This wasn't a street fight. This was a controlled, calculated move on his part. He would wait for them to make their next move. You're still standing, Dev said, his voice dripping with disbelief. How the hell are you still standing? Jake Harrison didn't answer. His silence was his statement. He wasn't here to prove anything to anyone. He wasn't here to engage in a shouting match or a petty fight. He was here to do his job, protect, defend, and serve. And if that meant showing these thugs what real strength looked like, then so be it. Dev, growing more frustrated with each passing second, shoved Harrison again, this time harder, aiming for his shoulder. But again, Harrison remained solid. His boots stayed firmly planted against the ground. Harrison's breathing remained steady. His training had prepared him for this. And when the time came, he would strike with precision and efficiency. The battle of words had ended. Now it was time for the battle of wills to begin. Harrison's eyes never left Dev's, the predator versus the trained warrior. And this time, it wasn't going to be Harrison who blinked. The tension between Harrison and Dev was at a breaking point. Harrison remained still, his posture perfect, his breathing steady. His eyes, though locked onto Dev's, were calculating, scanning every movement around him. Dev, on the other hand, was getting angrier by the second. The taunts, the physical shoves, they were all meant to provoke a response to get Harrison to react. But it wasn't working. Harrison's training was kicking in. He was no stranger to this kind of aggression. He had faced it on the battlefield, in war zones where the stakes were higher and the enemies were more ruthless. But this was different. It was personal, a test of wills, and Harrison wasn't about to back down. Dev's anger began to take on a more erratic form. He moved closer, circling Harrison like a predator. "You don't get it, do you?" Dev sneered, his voice filled with contempt. "You stand there pretending to be better than us, when all you're doing is hiding behind that uniform. You think that fancy rifle makes you untouchable?" His words were sharp, cutting through the air like a knife. But Harrison's gaze remained unmoved. The insult was not directed at him. It was a reflection of Dev's own bitterness, his anger toward a system that had rejected him and his brother. Harrison didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was a statement in itself. It was a reminder that he was not some street thug looking for a fight. He was a soldier, and a soldier's strength wasn't measured by how loud he could yell or how hard he could push. It was measured by his control, his discipline, and his ability to remain calm under pressure. Harrison had that in spades. His years of military training had taught him that the best response in a situation like this was not to engage in a battle of words. It was to wait for the moment and then strike with precision. Dev wasn't used to this kind of restraint. His world, violence was the answer to everything. He had spent years using force to get what he wanted, to take what was his. But here, in front of Harrison, his power was useless. The more he tried to provoke the guard, the more his frustration grew. It was clear that Harrison wasn't going to break, and that realization began to eat at Dev, making him more desperate, more dangerous. "Not going to talk, huh?" Dev taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. He reached into his pocket, his fingers tracing the outline of something metallic. It was a knife, Harrison knew. A clear threat, but one that wouldn't phase him. Harrison had been in situations far more dangerous than this, and a knife in Dev's hand wasn't going to change anything. But the movement was a signal. Dev had made his move. The gang was ready. They were going to strike, and strike they did. Dev lunged first, his fist flying toward Harrison's chest. A brutal, calculated punch meant to knock him off balance. But Harrison was ready. He sidestepped with the precision of a trained soldier, using Dev's momentum against him. The punch missed, and Harrison took the opportunity to seize control. His hand shot out, grabbing Dev's wrist and twisting it with expert precision. In one fluid motion, he disarmed the leader, sending the knife clattering to the ground. The speed and efficiency of the move were breathtaking. The gang members reacted immediately, rushing in from every angle, but Harrison was faster. His movements were a blur. Each strike calculated, each move designed to neutralize his opponents with surgical precision. He slammed one of the attackers into the stone pillar, knocking the air out of him with a single, powerful blow. Another tried to swing at him, but Harrison's rifle butt caught him square in the chest, sending him sprawling to the ground, gasping for air. Razor, the newest enforcer, drew his switchblade, but Harrison was already one step ahead. His boot connected with Razor's knee, the sickening crack echoing through the courtyard. The man went down with a scream, the blade falling from his hand. It was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. Harrison was moving like a machine, his training taking over as he systematically dismantled the gang's assault. There was no hesitation, no anger in his actions, just the cold, calculated efficiency of someone who had been trained to protect and neutralize threats. In less than 2 minutes, the gang that had come to ambush him was defeated. Dev, the leader, was the last man standing, barely able to keep his balance as he tried to recover from the brutal series of blows Harrison had delivered. But Harrison wasn't finished. His grip tightened on Dev's arm, twisting it until there was a sickening pop. The gang leader dropped to his knees, gasping for breath. "You think this makes you better than us?" Dev spat, still defiant even in defeat. His words were a mix of anger and disbelief. A man who had lost everything but refused to acknowledge his defeat. "You think this proves anything?" Harrison didn't respond. His silence was the only answer he needed to give. He had done his job. The threat was neutralized. The uniform he wore was more than just fabric. It was a symbol of everything Dev had tried to tear down: discipline, honor, duty. As the sirens wailed in the distance and the police moved in to secure the scene, Harrison stood tall, his posture as perfect as it had been before the confrontation. He didn't need to prove anything. The battle had been won, not with brute force but with restraint, precision, and the knowledge that sometimes the greatest strength comes from holding back. As Harrison stood tall, watching the chaos unfold around him, he knew that this wasn't just another confrontation. The air had changed. What started as a simple ambush had become something much deeper. Dev, the gang leader, was now on his knees gasping for air, his body battered and broken. His defiance was still there, but the fight had gone out of him. The rest of the gang lay scattered across the courtyard, each one incapacitated by Harrison's swift, precise moves. But it wasn't over yet. Harrison's sharp eyes scanned the scene, ensuring no further threats lingered. The sounds of sirens grew louder in the distance, but Harrison didn't move. His job was far from finished. Dev's ragged breaths filled the silence as he attempted to push himself up, his gaze burning with fury. "You think this changes anything?" He spat, his voice filled with venom, though there was no strength left in it. "You think you've won just because you can knock down a few street punks?" The words came out hoarse, desperate. His pride, however bruised, still clung to him like a shield. But Harrison, standing above him, remained unmoved. His uniform, still pristine despite the chaos, was more than just fabric. It was a symbol of something far greater than this petty street fight. The police arrived moments later, their flashing lights illuminating the scene, casting long shadows over the battered bodies of the gang members. The officers moved in quickly, securing the area, their eyes trained on the unconscious forms of Dev and his crew. The senior officer approached Harrison, taking in the sight of the defeated gang. "You all right, sir?" he asked, though there was no need to ask. The calm and composure Harrison exuded made it clear that he was in control. Harrison's gaze never wavered from Dev, who was now being cuffed and hauled to his feet. "I'm fine," Harrison replied, his voice steady, without a hint of fatigue. He hadn't broken a sweat. His movements had been fluid, controlled, each strike and maneuver executed with the precision of a seasoned soldier. This wasn't about raw strength. This was about discipline and purpose. "Your crew's not going to be getting up anytime soon," Harrison added, his eyes scanning the gang members being loaded into separate police vehicles. Dev's face twisted with rage as he was pushed into the back of the squad car, blood staining his teeth. "You think you've won," he shouted, his voice cracking with the weight of his frustration. "You think this uniform makes you better than me? You're just playing soldier while people like me die in the streets." Harrison stood silent, his back straight, his eyes forward, the embodiment of military resolve. He didn't need to respond to Dev's words. The fight had been won not with anger or vengeance, but with control, with professional detachment. His job wasn't to prove a point. It was to protect, to neutralize threats, and to stand firm in the face of danger. And that's exactly what he had done. The officers moved around Harrison, taking statements, checking the unconscious gang members for any further threats. Harrison didn't move. His role was clear. He was not just guarding the palace, he was guarding the ideals that came with the uniform, the values of discipline, honor, and duty that Dev and his crew had never understood. As the final officer finished his notes, he glanced at Harrison, respect evident in his eyes. "You're one hell of a soldier," he said quietly, a hint of awe in his voice. Harrison simply nodded, his expression unchanged. It wasn't about the praise. It wasn't about proving something to anyone. It was about doing his job, about upholding the values that had been drilled into him since the beginning. As the police vehicles drove away, sirens fading into the distance, Harrison remained at his post, a lone figure in the evening light. The only sign that anything had even happened were the scuff marks on the ground and a few patches of blood that would soon be washed away. But Harrison stood firm, unbroken, embodying everything that Dev had tried to tear down. For him, the fight had ended the moment he neutralized the first threat. The uniform wasn't just a costume. It was a symbol of strength, resilience, and the ability to remain calm in the face of overwhelming odds. This wasn't about showing off power. It was about knowing when and how to use it. And Harrison had done just that, proving once again that true strength lies not in brute force, but in restraint, precision, and unwavering discipline. Thank you for watching this intense and action-packed story. Now, we want to hear from you. What did you think about Harrison's response to the gang's aggression? Do you think he handled the situation with the right amount of restraint and discipline, or would you have reacted differently? It's easy to imagine how some might get caught up in the moment, but Harrison's calm under pressure is a true testament to the training and values he represents. What do you think makes someone truly strong? Is it the ability to fight back, or is it the courage to stay calm and in control when it matters most? How do you think you would have reacted if you were in Harrison's position? We're really curious to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let's get a conversation going. If you found this story as captivating as we did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We've got many more stories like this one coming your way, and you won't want to miss the next one. Also, share this video with someone who loves a good story about bravery, discipline, and standing up for what's right. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next video.